The Race by Christobel Mattingley. In class races, Greg was always last. He had long legs, strong legs. He could run like an emu. He could jump like a kangaroo. At cricket, he could field a ball faster than anyone. But he could never win a race. In school, he was always the first to finish a page of maths, and his drawings were the best in the class. But in mental arithmetic and spelling, he was always near the bottom. For 13, he added 30, and for 7, he subtracted 11. For cheer, he wrote chair, and for carrot, he wrote parrot. His teachers complained that he was careless. They told him that he didn't pay attention. They said that he daydreamed. But Greg wasn't careless. He did pay attention. He did not daydream. He listened. But sometimes all that he heard was a murmur, a fur of words, a blur of words. But he always smiled, no matter what people said. He smiled, but he did not quite join in. Greg was like a piece of jigsaw that did not quite fit, no matter which way it was turned. He was a puzzle because he did not quite belong. There was an emptiness around him, a gap between him and the others. He seemed to be in a world of his own. Greg didn't want to be alone. He wanted to fit that place, to fill that space, to win that race. He watched every face and smiled at people, looking for a way to be with them. He watched their lips, he watched their eyes, he watched their hands. When his classmates picked up their pencils, he picked up his. When they turned the pages of their books, he turned his. When they laughed, he laughed. But when it was his time to read, his voice was like a shining lump of quartz, smooth and hard, then suddenly rough and broken, so that the words sounded different. And when the teacher corrected him, he would say the words again in his own way. When the others put up their hands to answer a question, he usually put up his too, but sometimes he gave the wrong answer, because he only heard a stir of words, a whir of words. Then the teacher would say, "Daydreaming again? Pay attention, Greg." In the playground, no one could catch him in a game of chase. He always kept his eye on the ball and never missed it. But he couldn't win a race. He would line up with the others, balancing lightly on his fingers and toes. Sometimes he watched the starter, sometimes his classmates. But he was always last off the mark. One day, a new teacher came. She watched Greg as she watched the others. In his own way, Greg paid more attention to what went on around him than anyone in the class. But after she saw his spelling and his mental arithmetic, she knew he was lost. She was puzzled. She looked at him and saw what no one else had seen before. She knew he wanted to belong. She didn't say, "Pay more attention, Greg." She smiled to show she understood. She watched him as he worked by himself. She saw his correct maths and his exciting picture of a cricket match, and she was pleased, but more puzzled. She wanted to help Greg fit into his place amongst the others. She watched his quick eyes and copying hands. She heard the rough edge of his voice and the broken sound of his reading. Then she knew she'd found the clue. She took the class outside and lined them up to run a race. Greg wanted to show her how well he could run. He wanted so much to win. The grass was prickling his toes, and his heart was thumping his ribs as he poised, waiting for the start. Out of the corner of his eye, he watched the boy beside him. Suddenly, everyone was ahead of him, running towards the teacher. Greg was the last to reach her. He turned his face away. He'd wanted so much to be first this time, but he was last again, always last. He pulled 3 balls from his pockets and began to toss them higher, catching one after the other. Left hand, right hand, 1, 2, 3. He never let one fall. It was a trick that no one else could do. He heard the teacher clap her hands. He looked at her, and she was smiling at him, talking to all the class. They were to run another race, but this time with a different start. Instead of saying go, she would drop her hand so. Greg smiled as she showed them. As they went back to the starting line, Greg was so excited that he was jumping like a kangaroo. He had eyes like an eagle. He could see that signal even if the teacher were a dot on the horizon. He had long legs, strong legs too. He could run like an emu. He was going to win this race, he knew. Steadily, he watched, and as the teacher's hand began to fall, he was up and away, off down the track, with nobody ahead of him. It seemed a different race, so quick, so easy, so much fun. He crossed the line first. The teacher smiled at him, and he watched her lips form the words, "Well done." Greg smiled back. She had found the clue. She knew a way for him to win the race. She had smoothed away the rough edges so that he could fit. He knew she would help him find what he had lost before. The other words he somehow did not hear. Greg knew that he would not be alone anymore.